And let's see. So to start, let me get a good animation, like a sprite sheet that we can go off of real quick. Yeah, perfect. So, I don't know how big this one is. Let's see. 600 by 120. 100 by 120. Okay, cool. So let's say we have a sprite sheet. I'm going to look down over here in the project tab real quick. I was a way to view these bigger. Oh, right here. I guess it's as big as they come. Cool. So say we have a sprite sheet with a bunch of sprites that we want to add to an object and animate it. So I'm going to go to our sample scene, and like this has 6 sprites part of animation, but you can't just drag it in because it'll show all at once. So to fix that, we're going to go click on the sprite. We're going to go to the properties. First change to point filter so it doesn't look blurry. We're going to change the sprite mode to multiple. We're going to open the Sprite Editor, and it shows each individual sprite here. So we can either click and drag to select certain parts of the sprite, and then we can trim. That sometimes might be a little too much work though. If you have like a sprite sheet full of like 100 sprites, like this one down here has like 40 sprites in it, then you don't want to do it all manually. So if they're all the same size, you can go to slice. You can change the type to by cell size, and then type in the cell size. And this is about 100 by 120. And then I'm going to hit slice. It slices it automatically for you. I don't know if it needs to be trimmed or not though. I'll just trim it and then drag it all the way down. Still a little work, but oh well. So once you do all that, you just hit apply, and then when you click this, it should show you all the different sprites you have. So if you want to add it to a thing, we're going to make a sprite. I'm going to call this Squid Dude. You can click one, shift click the other ones, and just drag it in. We're going to call it Squid Idle. And it didn't show up yet because we haven't changed the sprite, the starting sprite in here. But that's what it looks like. Just gonna zero out its position and move it over a little bit. And then when we hit play, it should animate automatically. Yeah. We can check what the animator is currently playing. If we go to the animation tab, if you don't have that, you can go to Window, Animation, and there's an Animation tab and the Animator tab. So the Animation tab shows you what animations you have, and you can preview them by clicking the little play button up here. I think it also sometimes shows in the inspector a little preview. But then the animator shows how you can transition between different animations. So if you want to do like a hurt animation for this dude or something, then let me show it real quick. So it'll keep playing this animation over and over again because that's the default animation. So if you want to change the animation, we're going to go to Squid Idle, create new clip. If you want to just add another animation that you already have like preset, like with the sprites, you would just do the same thing. You would drag it in, and then it should make a new clip like this. But we want to make our own like custom animation with like changing the alpha so it fades in and out when it gets hurt. So to do that, we're going to go click on the clip, do create new clip, do squid hurt. And now there's 2 of these. So I'm going to right click on it and do make transition. I'm going to click on Squid Idle. And when you make a transition, by default, if you click on it, you can see what parameters need to be met and able to transition. And by default, it's just has exit time, so automatically after this animation is played, it'll exit out of this animation. So if you want to change that, you would just add different conditions, which you could do by, right now there's no conditions. So if you want to add conditions to it, you would just make sure the thing's selected and then go to the parameters window, the animator, and then there's a little drop down and you can do any of those. So you can do booleans, insert floats, which I'll do some of that more later when we go into like the action game, because in action game your guy can face either left, right, up, or down. So I set an int. So if the int is 0, he's facing down. If it's 1, he's facing right. If it's 2, he's facing up. And if it's left, if it's facing left, it's 3. So not too complicated. But we just want him to play this animation when he gets hurt and then switch out after a certain amount of time. So I should have added this to the enemy, but we can do that anyway. Let's do test enemy. And he has a collider, I think. Yeah, I think that's it. So don't know if the sprite is centered or not. The very first one might not be. Yeah, it's not centered. Now it looks better. So I'm going to change this to like 0.6, that's 7, and then 0.95 or something. And I'm going to go into the enemy controller. I'm just going to say this actually. When you click on the enemy, it's going to get hurt. It's the easiest way to do it. So I'm going to get a reference to the animator. I'm going to call it anim. So animator equals get component animator. And if we do that, we're just going to say anim.play. It's called squid hurt. If you wanted to check or change one of the parameters, you would just do anim.set. You can do either bool or int, sure it's integer, or float. We'll do more of that later, but for now we're just going to play the animation and then it should automatically switch out of the animation after it's done. HP. I'm going to give it a health. So I'm going to say HP equals max HP, so when it spawns, it's going to get its default health amount. And when you get hurt, we're going to do HP minus minus, and we'll say if HP is less than or equal to 0, set active to false. We'll throw an update here for when we actually make a move towards the player. Once it loads, I'm going to set its max HP to like 3 or something. And before we do that, we're going to change the animation to actually get him hurt. So first I'm just going to drag the same thing over. I'm going to drag it onto the little add property window. If you play, it'll just super fast. I wonder how we get at the same speed though. 1 and 1. Just try doing it like this. See if it'll work this way. So to update animations on the fly, you can click this little red dot, enable disable keyframe recording mode. So then it keeps track of whatever changes you make to this game object and makes animations based on that. So we're going to click on it, and we're going to start at the first frame. We're going to click on the sprite color. We're going to change its alpha. And when you change it, it'll save something in here. And then we're going to go like 0.2 seconds up. I'm going to change it again. We're going to change it to alpha 0. Go 0.2 again. So now it should just flash. Might be a little fast, but whatever. We'll just do it to like, you can go to the animator, click on the animation, and then go speed. 0.5 or something. And then I think that's it. And it keeps playing. Squid hurt doesn't, oh, because I added the parameter, didn't move it. That's why. So we need to remove this. And we want this to play once, so you can click and drag this to extend the animation. We'll make it play multiple times. We're going to make it play once and then transition back out. And also, we want to make sure that in the idle animation, we're going to save the squid's alpha to 1. In case it's for some reason not 1. We don't want it to be partially transparent when we're playing the regular animation. So it flashes, gets out, and that works. Cool. So now let's move the enemy toward the player. We can do that pretty easily by making a float speed, getting a rigid body reference, you know, if I'm going too fast or anything, or if you need help. Let's get rigid body, and I think we can just say, well, the easiest way to do it is we can just say vector 3 dot move towards, and we can just move towards the player, reference to the player. An object of type, and we're going to find the thing with the player controller. We're going to move from our current position to the player dot transform dot position by speed times time dot delta time. One thing I want to check is public float attack range. So we only want to move towards the player if we're not right next to him. If we're close enough, we don't want to keep moving toward him, because then we'll just clip into him or push him away or something. So we'll say distance equals vector 2 dot distance from our current position to the player's position. And then we'll just say if distance is less than or equal to attack range, sorry, is greater than or equal to attack range. So if we're not in attack range, then move towards the player. If you wanted to, you could also use something from last time, which was aim at mouse. You could use this to aim the player at to aim the enemy at the player. You can do transform.position minus player.transform.position, and then it should aim at the player, and then you can just say move up based on that. Like push your rigid body up, and then it should move towards the player. So now we're just going to move towards him if we're out of range. I think back to 3 dot move towards moves pretty fast, so this might break a little bit. Let's see. Oh no. We do have a player controller, right? We have a player controller. I know it's breaking partially because we don't have a rigid body on it. Click that to 0. We'll make this like 2, maybe because we're like at 1, maybe because we're close enough already. Huh. Interesting. Distance equals distance from me to the player. If distance is greater than we just do let me see this. Max distance delta. Do 3 move towards, let's see. Oh, duh, that's why. So I'm gonna say, oh shoot, I don't know where I typed that. Transform.position equals vector 3 move towards. Should be better. It's probably gonna zoom toward, yep, zoom towards. So let's do like 0.5, let's do attack range of 2. He moves toward the player. Although his rigid body is kind of breaking because his rotation's not frozen, but if he moves close enough, he should just stop. Yep. So we could say something like speed is 1.5, attack range is like 5. Use rotation. Say if distance is less than attack range, do 2 things. I'm gonna make an attack cooldown. I'm gonna make the time between attacks. So 0.3F or something like that. So if you're in attack range and attack cools is less than or equal to 0, like a function called attack, it's gonna say like just spawn a projectile. It's gonna move towards the player. And then attack cools equals time between attacks. So I'm going to make a reference to enemy projectile. Spawn it at this position. The rotation, we can either aim at the player when we spawn it, or we can aim at the player in the actual projectile controller. I'm gonna do it, I think, in here. I'm gonna paste this. Let me see. I know there's a thing called quantity.look position, but I think that works in 3 dimensions, not. I think 2D might be weird. Let's see, rotate towards, move towards. Equals maybe this. Maybe this will work. Let's see. Maybe not. So we're going to get the position. We're going to get, I think it's from mouse position minus player's position. So I think we have to get from transform.position minus transform position minus player position. Hopefully aims at the player. Let me get the angle. I think since we use this for the other one, it should work. Target minus, oh, the other thing says do this backwards, so let's see. See what happens. Is that my position there? Foot angle equals, yes, cool. So we're gonna go and make an enemy projectile. We have to set up 2. Make this like a green, which I'll just drop her that color. That's a little big. Add a circle collider, trigger. I'm going to add a rigid body, 2D. I'm going to add a tag. Tag is going to be projectile. That's a weird way to spell projectile. Projectile. Oh, I'll leave it there, whatever. Projectile. And it needs a new script. So I'm going to call this one enemy projectile. And let's see. In this one, we should be able to say something like just push up. Rigid body 2D. So void awake. I'm going to say on enable, we're going to do add force, transform.up. So whatever direction this thing is facing, we're gonna push it up. So we're gonna rotate it in this one to face towards the player. So the player is going to be the up position, and then we're just going to add force to that. So it should move toward him automatically. Times speed. So actually moves correctly. I'm going to do on trigger enter 2D. If collision, if we hit the player, if we hit the player, then we're gonna, I don't think the player has health yet, does he? He does have health, okay. So HP, does he actually get hurt now? So I'm gonna add something in here, and the projectile. You make it a float or an int? It's a float. So when we hit the player, we're gonna damage him. So we're gonna do collision dot get component. The easiest way to do this, because the player health is private, I'm gonna just make a function for it. Like void take damage. We're gonna pass in a float amount. I'm gonna do HP minus equals damage. Dot take damage, and we just pass in our damage amount. And also, we want to destroy the bullet. So we're going to add the projectile script to this. We'll say speed is like 50 or something, I don't know. Save it to a prefab by dragging it into the folder. And then the squid should get a reference to that prefab. Just drag it in. Oh, one more thing I think we forgot. So the enemy's going to shoot one time, I think. Because if distance is less than attack range and attack cools is less than or equal to 0, then we attack, and then we reset attack cools to be 0.3 or whatever our time between attacks is. But we never decremented our attack cools. So we're going to say if attack cools is greater than 0, then attack cools minus equals time dot delta time. So it's going to decrement it for us. So if it's, so we attack and then it gets set to 0.3 and then it counts down until it gets to 0 and then we can attack again if we're in range. That should work. Let's see what breaks now. Yep, so it's shooting a whole lot, and they're really slow, but let's see. 500. And also the attack cool should be something like 0.6 or something. The range might be like 7. Yep. The only thing is our player tagged? He's not tagged. That's why he's not taking damage. Yep, so now he's taking damage. Yep, works out. And if I click on him, he can get hurt, and then he can die. Cool. That's a pretty basic enemy. Later on we can do different states, like, oh, this enemy's gonna chase the player when he's in range, and he's gonna attack when he's not on a cooldown, and then if he's way out of range, then he's gonna stop chasing him and go back to their idle, which they can either like wander around or just stay in the same spot where they spawned. But yeah, questions about this so far, I was gonna do, let's see, it's animations and enemies. I can show tile maps real quick. So I'm gonna use these as the tiles. So I'm gonna go to multiple sprite filter. I think they're 64 by 64 or something. They're already cut because I showed somebody else how to do that. So I go good by cell size and I go 64 by 64 and then I slice it and then it does all this for me. I just apply it and then I have like all these sprites. I'm gonna make a new folder called tiles and I'm gonna drag. So we're gonna work with tiles real quick, and to find that window you're gonna go window, I think it's 2D tile palette. We should open it right here. So I'm gonna just click on the first one, then shift click on the last sprite in here. There's a lot of them. I'm gonna drag them in. Oh, weird. I think I have to make a tile palette first then. 2D tile map. Weird. Sorry, I did this a while ago, but sometimes they change things a little bit. I guess just create new palette. New palette. Let's save it to the tiles folder. There we go. When you drag it in, it should look like this. You just drag it. I put them in the wrong folder, even though I just made it. Oh well. It might take a minute to load, especially because I have like 50 of these, and it's gonna really fill up this folder all the way. I'm gonna get this junk out of the way. Move these. I guess it's fine there, whatever. Yeah, so now I have all these tiles. If you click on one, you should be able to edit and add them to the scene. This size is off, so we're going to change this to 32, I think, pixels per unit. So they look bigger. Yeah, so it's 32 pixels per unit. And that's because our tile size here, our grid size is 32 by 32. So we can just set it to 32. So then when you go into the scene, you can place tiles. You can just draw the map that you like. So I'm going to click this one, the fill box. I'm just going to click and drag. Oh, cool. There we go. If you go beyond the window, it kind of messes things up. So yeah, so you have a background immediately. We can add different walls and stuff. Let me add, I really have a wall sprite here. Let me just add a wall right there. It's just white, but whatever. We can just draw a wall in there. And if you want to add like collisions to this, so certain sprites will have collisions, we'll do something like this. I'm going to make a new tile map. I'm going to call this like walls or something. And I'm going to draw on it whatever walls I want. Whatever you want. I'm going to delete the other wall that we have. Okay, cool. I thought I broke everything. So by default, these are on the same layer. So if you want it to show on top of one another, then you'll change the order and layer in the sprite render. So I can change this to like -2 or something, so it shows way underneath everything. In case I add stuff later on, that'll default to layer 0. I don't want it to show under the grass. And I'll just make this like, yeah, I'll keep it like 1. It's fine. So then if we want to make these walls do anything, you're going to go to add component, and we're going to do Tilemap collider 2D. And it should automatically draw all the walls out for you, for all the objects. Can't really tell. But yeah, there's little green lines that are drawing the walls. And if we play the scene, we can't go through the walls because this collider's there. So, yeah, works out. Let me make this background really big. So I think our player and enemies are kind of huge anyway, so it might be a problem. But that's fine. We can just shrink them down in the prefabs. You can just go to 1:1:1. We can just change the scale. Never works. But yeah, so it's easy tiles and collisions. If you have specific parts of the collider, like let's see, let's find a good one. I don't know, say this tree, you only want it to collide with the actual tree part or the stump or something. Then you can change the collider by going to the sprite itself, Sprite Editor. You can do custom physics shape. Just make sure you have the right sprite selected. I need to find the tree somewhere in here. There you go. So you select it, go to custom physics shape, and you can just draw the shape on it. So if I want only to collide with this part, I'll just draw the little shape, and you can edit it from there. Make whatever shape you want. If you want to add lines, you would just click there. So you can make it really precise if you want to. Yeah. And then when you are done fixing, Control Z. When you're done fixing the shape, you would click apply. And make sure if you change the physics shape, or if you added stuff to this after you added the Tilemap Collider 2D, you want to go to that, you want to click this little box and hit reset, and then it'll redraw all of the, or recalculate all the little colliders for it. And now it has this little collider, so we can collide with certain parts of it, but not others. Yeah. Yeah, works out. So that's Tilemaps. Let's do a better health bar, I think, now. It takes a little more setup, but this is the way I would do like a Zelda-like health bar. I'm not gonna do it where there's like partially filled things, like you have 3 hearts, but you have like 2.5 filled. I'm just gonna do full hearts. So you have 3 hearts, and that means you have 3 health. If you take damage, you lose a whole heart. You can calculate which one to fill if you really want to do it that way later on, but it's fine. So we're gonna go into the test player. Right now we have, fix the window a little bit. So we have our UI up here, which is this thing, or an image, and these 2 are the health. So I'm gonna disable those. I'm gonna add an empty game object. This one's at, oh shoot, this one's at 200 by -50, so let's do it like that. So we're gonna anchor to the top left, and we're gonna do 200 to -50. I'm just gonna call this health parent. There's a thing in Unity called a layout group. We're gonna use the horizontal layout group. So we're going to draw them side by side. And let's see. So if you right click it and go to UI, you add another image. Let's do like 25 by 25. That might be too small even. You can tweak this however much you want later, but I'm gonna put it right there so it starts there, and if I duplicate stuff, it'll just keep adding to the side. So it'll automatically position it correctly. So if I change this, I want to anchor it to the middle left. Oh, that's why. So put left. So if I make this bigger, I think it'll, yeah, there we go. Kind of hard to tell right now because we can't actually see it, but if we do upper left, each one's 25 by 25, and we want to have 5 of them. Let's do like 150 or something. So 3, 4, 5. That's what it should look like at the end. We'll have 5 of them. Push it right there for now. And we're just going to change this to be an actual heart. No, I have a heart. Okay, there we go. So it's going to look like that. As we duplicate them, it'll just keep on adding more hearts. I know there's ways to fix this where I'll just make it work for now. I'm not gonna make it look nice, but so to do this, we're first going to get a reference to our health parent in the player controller. So we're gonna go health parent, and we're gonna make a function for adding and removing hearts. So whenever we want to have a new heart, we're just gonna spawn it into the scene, and we're gonna parent it to this thing, and it should automatically draw it like this across the way. Game object, HP image, something like that. I have an example here of what exactly I did last time. I think I just instantiated it and then set its parent. Just make sure. For the shoot 'em up that I did this. Yeah, so I just go game objects heart equals instantiate HP image. I don't think I have to even give it a position. And then I just say h.transform.set parent to heart to health parent dot transform. So this will instantiate it and then set its parent, and then it should automatically, with the horizontal layout group, it'll automatically layer it side by side to the other ones. If we want to delete one, we'll just say destroy health parent dot transform dot get child, and we're just gonna destroy the first child dot game object. And then a couple more things we're just gonna fix in here. Let's see. Our health needs to be an int now, and that breaks a couple other things in here. Int damage, equals damage. For int I equals 0, I is less than damage I plus plus. We're just going to remove heart and take damage. So every time we get hurt, we're just gonna remove 1 heart and decrement our health by the damage amount. Go to one of the test enemy. Actually, I think the player controller does that one, so H minus equals 1 instead. And then in the enemy projectile, we're gonna say int damage equals like 1 or something. Just be careful not to we might get an error if we try to destroy more hearts than we have images. So you gotta be careful with that. So you can do a check later to say if health is greater than 0, or if health is, actually let's just do this. If health is less than or equal to 0, then you break out of that function. Should make sure there's not an error if you do, so say you have 1 health left, but you take 4 damage, then it'll try to destroy the 4 hearts, but you only have 1 that spawned, and it'll throw an error. But if we do this, it should just exit the whole thing. Should. Hopefully. Profile must precede other type of name. Weird. So we gotta change. I'm gonna make the health image a prefab. Just gonna call it heart. Drag it into the prefab folder, delete it from here, and then the player is gonna need to have a reference to both the health parent and the heart. We'll just say max HP is like 5. Oh. One thing, we have to, when we spawn, we have to loop through and spawn hearts. So I equals 0, I is less than HP, I plus plus. Just gonna say add heart. Save it and then load. Yep. I'll do shooting us immediately, so we're losing our hearts as soon as we get them, but we still have them. So cool. That's a little better than a health bar, in my opinion, but it really depends what you're going for. See, and then this gives me an error still. Well, typically, if our health is 0, we would just die. So we don't have to worry about that. So let's just do that actually. Before we die, it just says game object dot set active to false. Problem might show up in the enemy controller though if it's trying to find the player and doesn't exist. So let's see what we can do about that. Like, let's see. Oh, he's already dead. Fuck. Weird. HP is less than or equal to 0. Do that. Weird. Take damage. Gonna set this to 5, not 54. A little different. Huh. HP is less than or equal to 0. see this real quick. So when we spawn, we have 5 hearts. That's what's happening. Cool. Let's do this then. Let's fix this. So in the enemy projectile, we're going to say bool has hurt. And on enable, we're going to say has hurt equals false. And so if we hit the player and we haven't hurt him yet, then we're going to hurt him. Then we're going to set hurt equal to true. See if that fixes it. Did we not set the projectile damage down? Maybe that's what happened. Should still be 1. I don't know why it's 15 still. I guess sometimes when you change the number in here after you initialize it, it doesn't update. Yep, there we go. Now he's dead. And we have no errors, so I guess that's fine. Usually I would check for if the enemy's checking for these, he has to check for if the player is alive still. So I'll say if player is not equal to null, then do all this. Actually, not this one though. This one I'll put down there, just in case. I should do the exact same thing anyway, but cool. So from there, let's see. So when using UI, there is text like this, and then there's extra fancy text, TextMesh Pro. I'll import those real quick. It says you can do a lot more with this, but I haven't really used it too much, so I'm not sure if it's a big deal to have to use it, but it's fine. So I have TextMesh Pro text, like just looking at text compared to that, it's overflow. So color is different, and it looks about the same when you are in the inspector at least, but apparently it looks a lot better and you can do more with it, but I haven't done it too much, but let's mess with that a little bit. So I'm going to put this in the top left next to those. Let me we'll just copy these values. So I'm going to go with these little dots, copy component, paste component and values. Oh, so it's not the exact same. Because they're not overflow, that's why. I think that's why. Let's see. Wrapping disabled overflow is okay. The anchoring is, yeah, that's what's wrong, the anchoring. So now if I paste it might go to the right spot. Yep, right there. So the size is different too, so let's see. $24. Now it's about the same. Cool. So I'm going to put this a little lower so we can look at the difference. I'm going to change the color so it looks the exact same. So get the dropper and go right there. So it says I may have to use using TM Pro. Might have to mess with this a little bit before I can get it right. So money text, I'll do public TextMesh Pro, public TM Pro. I have to get TextMesh Pro text. So TextMesh Pro TM text or something like that. I'm just gonna copy the thing down here for setting it. So it should be right here. Yep. So it looks a little bit different when you get the reference to it. You have to do TextMesh Pro and TM text and using TM Pro, but you should be able to do the same stuff with it. I go to the player, drag in. Oh, I cannot just drag in. It's interesting. Interesting. TM Pro equals game object dot component pro UGUI. Weird. Using TM Pro. Let me drag it in. Can't drag text. Of course, there's no answer to that one. Somebody says to do TextMesh Pro UGUI or something. Maybe that's why. Yep, there we go. I'm sure we're about the same way. But this didn't used to be included in Unity. You had to download a bunch of other stuff for the things for it. But they put support for it in here, so apparently it's really good to use. Though I haven't used it like at all. But it's an option if you guys want to use better text. I think you can do more better formatting and stuff with it and code easier. There's different functions you can use with it that might be helpful, but yeah. Last thing I was going to do was go over lists. So I'm going to do that by, just real quick. Next time we'll go over wave spawning so that we can expand on lists to actually like spawn enemies around the map at regular intervals. So we're going to go to a game controller. So list game object enemies. So you instantiate a list by doing this. New list. Oh, sorry. It goes new list game object. Open close. Kind of like how you get a component, you do the open close brackets or parentheses. But if you don't do this equals new list part, it won't show up in the inspector. So if we go into a game controller, then yep, so you can click a drop down and it'll show how many enemies there are. Similar to how you can use an array, the public for arrays, you just do open close square brackets after the type you want to make the list of, or the array of. You should look up the same way. Differences between lists and arrays, they go over that in, like, I think data structures or something. But lists, you can increase the size of it while you're in game or in the code or whatever. But arrays, you have to do it in the inspector, like the first time you do it. So if I change it to 5, it's only ever going to be 5. I think there's ways to get around that, but if you have a set number of enemies in a level that you want to be spawning or keeping track of, you can just make a giant array of them. Because it takes up less space than lists. But for lists, you can interact with them, and you can add to them, remove from them. So like, say you want to add, have a list of all the different items you can get. Then if you spawn that item and you have it, then you want to remove it from the list so you don't get it again. So you can do that with lists, but you can't do it with arrays. You can keep track of like what index that is in the array and just not use that index anymore, but that's more work than you need to do. List, you can just do list.remove at a certain point. You just do void update. You just do like enemies dot remove. You do add. You do clear. Different things like that. Whereas I don't know if there's anything you can do with arrays. You can check with the length. You can do different things like that. Get value, set value. Yeah. You just loop through these in the same kind of way. You can just loop through the entire list by doing, I think you can do for each game object enemy in enemies debug.log and name or something. Whereas for this, you can do the same thing. You can do for each enemy or game object enemy in enemy array, but it's easier to just do the for loop. Array.length I++. We would do enemy array sub I dot name. Got that little close one. You can do this the same way with lists too if you want to. You can just do enemies dot count. And we can just do enemies. And then just should work the same way mostly, but arrays are more simple, and you'll do less with arrays. The lists are more versatile and helpful in the long run. So if I want to use those, I would just drag in enemies. Enemy coin brick, just do enemy paddle there. Doesn't really matter what I do. Oh, and it's looping each time, so that's why. So for each loop enemy, for each loop coin, for each loop brick. Oh, yeah. For each loop array. I'm just gonna zero these out so I don't break stuff next time. But yeah, what I would usually use lists for rather than enemies. Maybe I would do an enemy array of every enemy in the game and put it in there, And then for a list, I would have the current enemies you can spawn in that list. So say you have like a wave defense game, and you have like 6 different enemy types, but you want to introduce them one at a time. So wave 1, you would just grab one enemy from this enemy array and add it to the enemies list. So you can only spawn this enemy for this one wave. And then the next wave, you would just add another enemy to it, and you just keep adding enemies every wave to the enemy list. Yeah, where you have more control over what's actually spawning. I'm gonna disable. Why not? But yeah, I think that's all I'm gonna go over this class. Lists, enemies, animations, Tilemaps, text mesh, and better health. I did not get to do 3D stuff, but I just did like a simple rolling ball thing. So it wasn't much anyway. It was I might do that next time. It would just move the ball back and forth. You would spawn it and you move it back and forth. And I would add like obstacles and stuff that you guys can do, but yeah, I'll do that next time. So hope that helped somewhat. If you're making a 2D game, tile maps are really helpful. You don't have to drag every single tile out onto this map. You can just draw them out with the tile palette and do it that way and just add colliders as needed. Did some enemy stuff, so that's good. It's always helpful. Keep track of what enemies are what actions gonna be taking, where they're moving and stuff like that. Animations are gonna be they get to be a pain when you have like 30 of them and you have transitions between different ones. You have to make sure you have each transition going back and forth, and it could be like a giant spider web of stuff later on. But if you have animation parameters, you can just set it all that way and then just make sure you have the connections right. Say like, oh, only switch to this animation if you're hurt, and then after you're done being hurt, if you're moving, then you can go to this animation. If you're idle, you can go to this one instead. So we'll do more specific transitions later on with parameters and stuff. You can uncomment or delete this part for next time. So the wave spawn is going to be a lot to set up probably. But yeah, I think that's it for now. I'm going to hang out for another 5 minutes if anybody has questions or concerns or anything. So.
Thanks for this session. Really
Appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks, cool.
I hope it helped.
Thank you.
And I'll put the lecture up once it loads. Let me just save this right now.